A loaded Glock 19 was pointed directly at her temple, the officer holding it, shaking with unearned adrenaline. When she slowly produced her gold FBI shield, he didn't lower the weapon. He laughed. He called it a fake. But 60 seconds later, he'd be the one begging for mercy. The sun was a punishing, relentless force over the cracked asphalt of Route 66, just outside the city limits of Kingman, Arizona. Special Agent Sloan Jenkins of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Phoenix Field Office was running on fumes. For the past 48 hours, she had been buried waist-deep in a multi-agency sting operation, dismantling a local methamphetamine ring that had been funneling cash across the border. Sloan hadn't slept in 2 days. Her eyes burned, her shoulders ached from the weight of her tactical vest, now discarded in the trunk, and her only desire was a hot shower and 12 hours of uninterrupted sleep. She was driving an unmarked, thoroughly unglamorous 2014 Ford Taurus. It was a fleet vehicle designed specifically to blend into the dusty background of the American Southwest. Sloan herself was dressed down, a faded grey t-shirt, dark denim jeans, and a battered pair of Converse. Her natural hair was pulled back into a tight utilitarian bun. Without her tactical gear or her tailored navy suit, she didn't look like a high-ranking federal agent. She looked like just another weary driver trying to make it home. And in a few terrifying moments, that was exactly the problem. The digital speedometer on the dash read exactly 65 miles per hour. The cruise control was locked in. Sloan was a creature of habit and discipline. She didn't speed, she didn't swerve, and she certainly didn't invite unnecessary encounters with local law enforcement. But as she passed a rusted billboard advertising a long-closed diner, the glaring, strobing flash of red and blue lights erupted in her rearview mirror. Sloan let out a long, exhausted sigh, checking her mirrors. "Really?" she muttered to the empty car. She tapped the brakes, disengaging the cruise control, and immediately hit her blinker, pulling the Taurus onto the gravel shoulder. The dust kicked up in a massive cloud, obscuring the cruiser behind her for a fraction of a second, before it parked aggressively close to her rear bumper. Through her side mirror, she watched the driver's side door of the cruiser pop open. Out stepped Officer Travis Haynes. Haynes was a man who wore his authority like a heavy, ill-fitting crown. He had been with the local county sheriff's department for 6 years, a tenure long enough to give him a dangerous sense of ownership over this desolate stretch of highway, but not long enough to temper his ego with actual wisdom. He strutted toward Sloane's vehicle, his right hand resting casually, yet threateningly, on the butt of his service weapon. From the passenger side of the cruiser, a younger, visibly nervous rookie named Liam Davies emerged. Davies hung back near the trunk of the Taurus, his eyes darting around the empty desert landscape. Inside the car, Sloan went through the mental checklist she had been taught not by the FBI Academy in Quantico, but by her father when she was 16 years old. A set of rules specifically designed for black drivers navigating police encounters. Engine off, keys on the dashboard, windows rolled all the way down, hands placed firmly at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. She knew the statistics. She knew how quickly a mundane traffic stop on an isolated desert road could mutate into a headline. The badge locked inside the breast pocket of her jacket, which was draped over the passenger seat, was a shield in federal court, but out here, in the dust and the heat, she was just a black woman sitting alone in a car. "Afternoon," Sloan said, keeping her voice even calm and stripped of any emotion as Haynes leaned his heavily mirrored sunglasses into her window. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Haynes demanded. No greeting, no explanation for the stop, just a sharp, barking order that immediately established his desperate need for dominance. "I can get those for you, Officer Sloan said, not moving her hands from the wheel. "My wallet is in the inside pocket of the jacket on the passenger seat. I'm going to reach for it now. I didn't ask for a narration. Haynes snapped his jaw tight. Just get the damn license. Sloane turned her head slowly. She kept her movements deliberate and telegraphed. She unzipped the interior pocket of her dark windbreaker and extracted her leather wallet. She intentionally didn't pull the FBI credentials flip case. There was an unwritten rule among federal agents not to badge local cops unless necessary. It was seen as arrogant. She just wanted her civilian driver's license, wanting to take her ticket for whatever imaginary infraction Haynes had concocted, and go home to her bed. She handed her Arizona driver's license through the window. Haynes snatched it from her fingers, looking from the plastic card to her face, his lips curling into a sneer. Sloane Jenkins. He read aloud, stretching out her name as if testing it for a lie. You know why I pulled you over, Sloane. I don't, officer. My cruise control was set to the speed limit. You swerved, Haynes lied without blinking. Crossed the yellow line back there about 2 miles ago. You drinking, smoking something? Sloane felt a flare of cold anger in her chest, but she kept her breathing steady. No, officer. I'm completely sober. I'm just trying to get home. Step out of the vehicle, Haynes commanded. Sloane froze. Excuse me. Are you deaf? I said step out of the vehicle. Haynes leaned back, his hand wrapping fully around the grip of his holstered gun. Officer, Sloane said, her voice dropping an octave, slipping into the authoritative tone she usually reserved for interrogations. I have not committed a moving violation, and there is no probable cause to order me out of my vehicle for a routine traffic stop. You can write the citation, and I will be on my way. Haynes's face flushed a deep, ugly crimson. He wasn't used to defiance, especially not out here, and certainly not from a woman who looked like Sloane. He saw the faded t-shirt, the old car, the color of her skin, and he calculated that she was powerless. It was a fatal miscalculation. Listen to me very carefully, Haynes hissed, ripping his gun from its holster and pointing it squarely at Sloane's face through the open window. You are going to open this door, and you are going to get out on the ground, or I am going to rip you through this window. Do you understand me? Behind the Taurus. Rookie Officer Liam Davies gasped, taking a sudden step forward. Travis, Jesus, man, what are you doing? Shut up, Davies, watch the perimeter. Haynes screamed over his shoulder, his eyes wide and manic, as he shoved the barrel of his Glock closer to Sloane's temple. The situation had officially crossed the point of no return. Time seemed to dilate, stretching out like the endless Arizona highway. The heavy metallic click of the Glock's safety being disengaged echoed in the quiet desert air. It was a sound Sloane had heard 100 times on the firing range, but feeling the hollow black eye of a loaded barrel hovering inches from her skull was entirely different. She didn't panic. Her heart rate spiked, yes, but her training overrode her fear. The man holding the gun was erratic, sweating profusely despite the dry heat, his finger hovering dangerously close to the trigger. He was a powder keg, and any sudden movement would give him the excuse he was desperately searching for to pull the trigger. Okay, Sloane said, her voice eerily calm, projecting a deadly stillness. My hands are on the wheel. I am complying. Open the damn door! Haynes roared, spittle flying from his lips and landing on the Taurus's windowsill. Officer Haynes, Sloane said, reading his silver name tag. Listen to me very carefully. I am a sworn federal officer. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My credentials are in the same jacket on the passenger seat. I am going to reach for them, very, very slowly. If you shoot me, you will be murdering a federal agent, and you will spend the rest of your natural life in Florence Supermax. Haynes blinked his brain, struggling to process the information. For a split second, the gun wavered. Then a twisted, incredulous grin spread across his face. You're an FBI agent." He mocked, his tone dripping with absolute contempt. "Yeah, and I'm the damn King of England. Get out of the car, you lying." He trailed off, shaking his head. "You people will say anything." "Travis, hold on," Davies called out from the rear of the car, his voice trembling. "Let her show the ID. Just let her show it, man." "I told you to secure the perimeter, Davies." Haines snapped. He looked back at Sloane. "Fine. Show me the fake badge. Do it slow. You flinch, I drop you." Sloane kept her eyes locked on Haines's twitching trigger finger. Moving with agonizing slowness, she lifted her right hand from the steering wheel. She reached over to the passenger seat, her fingertips finding the cool, heavy leather of her FBI credentials case. She pulled it back into her lap, then slowly lifted it toward the window, flipping it open. The gold shield caught the brutal midday sun glinting brightly. Beneath it, her official bureau identification card, Sloane Jenkins, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation, complete with the Department of Justice seal, the watermarks, and Arthur Campbell's, the director's, stamped signature. Haines snatched the leather case out of her hand. He didn't even drop his gun. He held his weapon on her with his right hand, while he brought the badge up to his face with his left. He stared at it for 3 agonizing seconds. Then he burst into laughter. It was a cold, cruel, barking laugh that echoed off the empty desert landscape. "Whoa," Haines chuckled, tossing the credentials casually onto the hood of Sloane's Taurus, the heavy badge scratching the paint as it slid down toward the windshield wipers. "I gotta admit that's high quality. What did that cost you on Amazon? $50, 100. Sloane's eyes narrowed. The stillness in her evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharpened fury. "That is federal property, officer, and you have just assaulted a federal agent, detained me without probable cause, and are currently brandishing a deadly weapon at a sworn officer of the Department of Justice. I'm pointing a gun at a suspect resisting arrest who just presented forged law enforcement credentials," Haines countered smoothly, completely lost in his own fantasy. "That's a felony, sweetheart. Now for the last time, get out of the car." Sloane knew she couldn't reason with him. Haines was too far gone, too deeply entrenched in his bigotry and his ego to back down. If she stepped out of the car, he would throw her to the dirt, cuff her, and likely manufacture a charge of resisting arrest. Or worse, he'd accidentally discharge his weapon in the scuffle. She needed to tip the scales. "All right," Sloane said slowly. "I'm stepping out." With her left hand, she reached for the door handle, but beneath the steering wheel, out of Haines's line of sight, her right hand dropped to the center console. She didn't reach for her own weapon, a custom-fitted Sig Sauer P32-0 tucked away in a lockbox under the seat. A shootout was exactly what Haines wanted. Instead, her fingers found the heavy encrypted satellite radio, bolted to the center console, the one she used to communicate directly with the Phoenix field office and surrounding federal task forces. By feel alone, she flipped the protective plastic toggle on the side of the radio. Then she pressed and held the bright red panic button for 3 solid seconds. It was a silent alarm. In the Phoenix field office, 200 miles away, an alarm was currently blaring in the operations center, instantly broadcasting her vehicle's GPS coordinates. And because she was currently assigned to a joint multi-agency task force, that distress signal was simultaneously beamed to the dash consoles of every federal marshal, DEA agent, and state police supervisor within a 50-mile radius. Code 1013. Federal officer down or in extreme danger. Respond code 3. All units. Sloane pulled the door handle and stepped out into the sweltering heat. Before both of her feet were even on the pavement, Haines lunged. He grabbed her by the shoulder of her t-shirt, yanking her violently forward. He slammed her chest first against the hot metal of the Taurus's roof, kicking her legs apart with his heavy combat boots. "Hands behind your back," he screamed, holstering his weapon and ripping a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. Sloane didn't fight him physically. She let him wrench her arms behind her back, feeling the cold steel bite painfully into her wrists as the cuffs ratcheted tight. "Travis, this is a mistake," Davies pleaded, rushing forward now. The young rookie looked terrified, staring at the gold shield sitting on the hood of the car. He reached out and picked it up. He tilted it, watching the holographic watermarks shift on the ID card. "Travis, this is real. The watermarks? It's a real bureau ID." "Shut up, Davis." Haynes panted, shoving Sloane hard against the car to ensure the cuffs were tight. He leaned into her ear, his breath hot and reeking of stale coffee. "You're going to prison, you hear me? Impersonating a federal officer. I'm going to ruin your life." Sloane turned her head, resting her cheek against the scorching roof of her car. She looked directly at Haynes, her expression utterly devoid of fear. The trap had been sprung. Haynes just didn't realize he was the one standing in it. "Officer Haynes!" Sloane whispered her voice, carrying over the wind. "Look down the highway." Haynes scoffed, but his eyes instinctively darted toward the horizon. About 3 miles down the straight flat stretch of Route 66, the heat haze was shimmering violently, and bursting through that haze like a swarm of angry hornets were the flashing strobe lights of not 2, but 6 black, unmarked SUVs screaming toward them at over 100 miles an hour. The low rumbling growl of high-performance engines preceded the vehicles. It started as a vibration in the asphalt, vibrating through the soles of Haynes's combat boots. He squinted against the glaring Arizona sun, his hand still gripping the back of Sloane's shirt. The heat haze broke. 6 unmarked, matte black Chevrolet Tahoes and Ford Explorers tore down the 2-lane highway, moving in a tight, synchronized tactical diamond. They weren't just driving fast. They were flying, their grills consuming the distance at terrifying speed. Hidden LED strobes behind their grills and in their windshields pulsed with blinding red and blue intensity. The piercing wail of multiple federal Q sirens ripped through the quiet desert, a sound so loud and aggressive it seemed to rattle the teeth in Haynes's skull. "What the hell?" Haynes muttered, his grip on Sloane, loosening just a fraction. "Davies, did you call dispatch? Who the hell is that? I didn't touch the radio." "Travis, rookie officer," Liam Davies yelled back, his voice cracking with pure panic. He was backing away from the Taurus, his hands instinctively rising to his chest. He looked from the incoming convoy to the gold FBI shield still resting on the hood of Sloane's car, and the dreadful reality of the situation finally slammed into him. "Travis, let her go. Let her go right now." "Shut up," Haynes shouted, but the bravado was bleeding out of his voice, replaced by a creeping cold dread. The federal convoy didn't slow down to a polite stop. They executed a rolling block, a maneuver designed to trap high-value targets. 2 Tahoes swerved violently into the oncoming lane, skidding onto the opposite shoulder and cutting off any forward escape route. 2 more slammed on their brakes directly behind Haynes's county cruiser, effectively boxing it in. The final 2 SUVs angled in aggressively their heavy brush guards, stopping mere inches from the driver's side of Sloane's Taurus. A suffocating cloud of dust and gravel washed over the scene, coating Haynes and Sloane in a fine layer of brown grit. Before the dust could even begin to settle, the doors of the SUVs flew open. "Federal agents, drop your weapons. Drop your weapons now." Over a dozen heavily armed men and women poured out of the vehicles. These weren't local beat cops in pressed polyester shirts. They were operators wearing heavy olive-drab plate carriers, emblazoned with large yellow letters, FBI, DEA, and U.S. Marshal. They carried short-barreled M4 carbines and Remington 870 shotguns, and every single barrel was leveled directly at the chest of Officer Travis Haynes. Hands in the air, step away from the agent. Do it now, the commanding voice boomed from the PA system of the lead Tahoe. Stepping out from behind the reinforced door was Special Agent in Charge Robert Callahan. Callahan was a 20-year veteran of the Bureau, a broad-shouldered, silver-haired man who ran the Phoenix field office with an iron fist and a notorious lack of patience for local corruption. He didn't carry a rifle. His hand rested firmly on the Glock 17 on his hip, his eyes locked onto Haynes with a furious, unblinking glare. Haynes was paralyzed. His brain misfired desperately, trying to construct a reality where he was still the one in charge. He let go of Sloane's shirt and took a half-step back, his hands hovering awkwardly near his duty belt. "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Hold on!" Haynes shouted, trying to project authority over the deafening cacophony of federal sirens. "I'm County Sheriff's Department. I have a suspect in custody for forged credentials. Stand down." Callahan didn't even slow his pace as he marched into the center of the dust-choked trap. "You have exactly 3 seconds to unbuckle your gun belt and step away from my agent, or my men will put you down, officer." 1. "She's a fake," Haynes screamed, his voice breaking into a high-pitched squeal. "She swerved. She resisted." 2. The unmistakable, terrifying sound of a dozen tactical rifles chambering rounds echoed in unison. The metallic clack-clack cut through the noise like a guillotine blade dropping. Haynes looked to his left. A U.S. Marshal, a massive bearded man named Wyatt Gibson, had his red dot sight aimed squarely at the center of Haynes's forehead. Haynes looked to his right. 2 DEA agents were flanking him, their weapons drawn and steady. He looked behind him, hoping to find Davis, but the rookie had already thrown his own hands in the air and dropped to his knees in the dirt, wisely surrendering to the overwhelming force. Haynes's ego shattered. The illusion of his absolute power evaporated in the suffocating desert heat. His hands began to tremble violently. Okay, God, don't shoot," Haynes whimpered. With shaking fingers, he unclipped the heavy plastic buckle of his duty belt. The belt holding his Glock, his taser, and his pepper spray hit the asphalt with a heavy thud. He kicked it away from his feet and raised his hands high above his head. "On your knees. Face away from me. Interlace your fingers behind your head." Gibson barked, stepping forward. Haynes dropped to his knees, the rough asphalt biting through his uniform pants. He laced his fingers behind his head, his chest heaving with panicked, shallow breaths. Callahan ignored the kneeling cop entirely. He walked straight to Sloane, who was still standing calmly against the side of her Taurus, her hands cuffed tightly behind her back. "You good, Sloane?" Callahan asked, his tone shifting instantly from commanding to deeply concerned. "I've been better, Bobby," Sloane replied, her voice steady, though a bead of sweat rolled down her dust-streaked face. "Wrists are a little tight." Callahan signaled to one of the DEA agents, who rushed forward with a universal handcuff key. A second later, the steel jaws clicked open. Sloane brought her arms forward, wincing slightly as blood rushed back into her hands. She rubbed her raw wrists, then calmly reached over to the hood of her car, picked up her gold FBI credentials, and slid them back into her jacket pocket. "Did he draw on you?" Callahan asked quietly, his eyes drifting over to Haynes, who was now being aggressively frisked by Marshal Gibson. "Glock 19. Pointed directly at my left temple," Sloane stated factually. "Disengaged the safety, claimed I was swerving, ordered me out without probable cause, and laughed when I presented my federal ID." Callahan's jaw tightened. A muscle ticked in his cheek. He turned slowly and walked over to where Haynes was kneeling in the dirt. "Officer." "Haynes, is it?" Callahan said, reading the name tag on the terrified man's chest. Haynes looked up, his face pale and slick with sweat. The arrogant sneer was entirely gone, replaced by the pathetic wide-eyed stare of a cornered animal. "Sir, please, you have to understand. We get a lot of smugglers on this route. They buy fake badges, they buy fake uniforms. I was just protecting my jurisdiction." "Protecting your jurisdiction?" Callahan repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "By pulling over an unmarked Federal Fleet vehicle holding a gun to the head of a special agent and detaining her on the side of a highway." "I didn't know," Haynes pleaded, looking frantically toward Sloane. "Ma'am, tell them I didn't know." Sloane walked over, stopping right next to Callahan. She looked down at the man who just 3 minutes ago held her life in his hands, simply because he felt entitled to do so. "I told you exactly who I was," Sloane said, her voice like ice. "I presented my credentials. You chose to ignore them because I didn't fit your narrow, prejudiced profile of what authority looks like. You saw a black woman in a t-shirt, and you saw a victim." No, that's not it." "Save it," Callahan interrupted, holding up a hand. "Here is the truly tragic irony of your day, Officer Haynes. My task force has been out here for 48 hours, rolling up the Jimenez cartel's local meth distribution network, a network that, according to our wiretaps, has been paying off local county deputies to look the other way when their product moves down Route 66. Haynes's eyes widened in absolute horror. The color drained entirely from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost. "We didn't have names yet," Callahan continued, leaning down so his face was inches from Haynes. "We just knew there were dirty cops on this stretch of highway, and then out of nowhere you pull over one of the lead agents on the Jimenez case, point a gun at her head, and try to illegally detain her. Now a reasonable person might look at that and think you were trying to silence a federal investigator to protect your cartel kickbacks. What? No, God, no! I don't know anything about any cartel," Haynes screamed, thrashing against Gibson's grip. "I'm just a patrol cop. I'm not dirty. I just made a bad call. It was a bad stop." "A bad stop," Sloane echoed softly. "That bad stop carries a mandatory minimum of 10 years in a federal penitentiary for aggravated assault on a federal officer, brandishing a firearm during the commission of a felony, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law." Marshal Gibson pulled a pair of heavy, oversized federal handcuffs from his vest. Unlike Haynes's standard cuffs, these were connected by a thick, rigid hinge, preventing any movement of the hands. "Stand up, Haynes!" Gibson ordered, hauling the weeping officer to his feet. He wrenched Haynes's arms behind his back, the rigid cuffs clicking aggressively into place. "You're under arrest." Across the highway, one of the FBI agents was speaking gently with Rookie Officer Davies. Davies was vigorously nodding his head, frantically pointing to the dash camera mounted in his cruiser and tapping his own chest. Callahan looked over at the rookie, then back to Haynes. "Looks like your partner just volunteered to turn over the dash cam and body cam footage. He's very eager to cooperate. Funny how fast loyalty vanishes when federal prison is on the table." Haynes was sobbing now, his chest heaving, as Gibson dragged him toward the back of one of the black Tahoes. The imposing marshal popped the rear hatch, shoved the disgraced cop into the back, and slammed the heavy door shut, sealing Haynes in the dark. The dust on Route 66 was finally beginning to settle. The flashing red and blue lights painted the desert landscape in chaotic, rhythmic strokes. Callahan let out a long sigh, running a hand through his silver hair. He looked at Sloane. "You handled that perfectly, Jenkins. Most agents would have panicked. You kept him talking until we got the ping." "I couldn't draw on him, Bobby," Sloane said quietly, looking at the black SUV holding Haynes. "If I had reached for my piece, he would have fired. He was looking for a reason. I saw it in his eyes." "I know," Callahan said softly, "but he picked the wrong woman on the wrong day. Come on, let's get you in a Tahoe. Someone else can drive your fleet car back to Phoenix. You've earned a ride in the air conditioning. Sloane nodded, exhausted, but deeply satisfied. As she walked toward the waiting SUV, she glanced back at the flashing lights of Haynes's abandoned cruiser. The highway was quiet again, the brutal Arizona sun beating down on the empty road. Justice out here was rarely swift, and it was rarely caught on camera. But today the trap had worked flawlessly. The predator had become the prey, brought down by his own blind arrogance. If you felt the adrenaline rush of this incredible true crime takedown, hit that like button right now. Stories like Sloane's remind us that ego and abuse of power always meet their match when true accountability arrives. Share this video to spread the message